Today we're going to talk about living with someone and considering the following before you ever decide to live with a man, or if you're a woman or you're a man watching this, living with a woman. So, why is this so important to talk about? Because when it comes to romantic relationships, let's face it, what's the point of entering into a relationship if you don't see it from the long run? You don't see it as being all in at some point. But today's all in relationships are quite a bit different from, say, 50, 100 years ago. See, 50 or 100 years ago, women were oftentimes very dependent upon men for financial resources, and certainly younger women back in the day, they didn't have physical intimacy with someone unless they got married. So the all in began with marriage, certainly 100 plus years ago. That began changing around the 1960s and 1970s, probably at the same time where divorces started to increase around that time. And those of us in midlife, which I say is after baby making years and before retirement, roughly 75% of us in the dating marketplace over 45 years old are divorced. Why is this critically important? Because a lot of men and women after divorce become rather gun shy with the idea of getting married again. I know just as many women as there are men that are very reluctant to getting married. So, if marriage isn't the ultimate goal for many people, then what about living together? What are the benefits of living together? Well, certainly in an environment where the financial cost to support oneself can be very challenging. Two incomes are better than one, certainly. And when you're sharing the same roof, you can eliminate a significant overhead component from the perspective of rent or mortgage. So when two people are living together, they actually get to share expenses. You don't need two Netflix accounts. You don't need two of this and two of that. You can actually reduce your cost of living by a dramatic amount. And certainly as people age, the fact of the matter is the cost to live until you die can be rather expensive these days. So taking advantage of two people, two incomes are better than one, or two people living under the same roof is better than one. Although what's fascinating to me today, do you know that we talked about the marriage rates? Roughly 75% of singles in the dating marketplace are divorced. Do you recognize that second and third marriages end at a much higher rate than first marriages? So, what does that say about our capacity to be with another human being? And actually living with another human being can be rather challenging. This is why I'm shooting this video today to talk about my suggestions of how you may want to consider relationships going forward. Now, a big trend today is something known as living together apart. Let me find the book that I have here. Um, Actually, there's a book called Living Apart Together. By the way, very skinny book. I mean, we're only talking about 100 pages, this book, Living Apart Together by Ann Watson. This is a popular experience many couples are doing where they're actually maintaining both of their residence and keeping their relationship together and spending on average maybe 3 or 4 or 5 days a week together on a regular basis, but maintaining their separate residence. Now, that's easy for couples who actually have the financial resources to do so. But not everybody has the financial resources, or they don't want to spend two rents, giving rent to somebody when you're spending half your time at another person's home anyway. So living together seems to be oftentimes for financial benefits. But as I said before, what's the point of being in a relationship if you're not going to be all in together? And for those of us in midlife, 40s, 50s, 60s, and even 70s, for those of us in our 60s plus, that's the age range I'm in, the reality is taking care of ourselves can be much more challenging. And it's certainly better to do it as a couple living under the same roof than doing it by yourself. So, one of the things I encourage everyone to consider before they ever live with someone is to do the following, is to actually spend 1 month consistent in each other's homes before you actually live together. Now, I know 1 month can be very challenging. maybe from a scheduling perspective, maybe work issues, maybe this is a challenge. And certainly those of you that are in long distance dynamics, that can be certainly challenging. But if you haven't spent a month in each other's home to see how this person operates day in, day out through their regular life, just to see if you get along with one another, quite frankly, many people that do the weekend kind of relationships where they hang out Friday, Saturday, and Sunday and they go back to their respective homes, they're seeing it in a bubble environment. Those that do long distance dating environment dynamics oftentimes find themselves in what I call bubble or vacation relationships. They're not in the day in, day out aspect of a relationship. But spending 1 month in each other's homes at least gives you a flavor of what it's like to be with each other. Now, sadly, in my circumstance, and by the way, my beloved and I are considering living together. I know we've only been together about 5 months at this point, but it's something we're strongly considering for financial reasons. Also, we don't like driving back and forth. We live roughly about 50 minutes from one another. It's not the drive itself, but it's the connection that we'd like to have on a regular basis, to be in each other's lives on a regular basis. But the question is, how do you carve out your sovereignty when two people live together? In my particular case, we both work from home. Now, for some of you out there, it's great. You go into a work environment. The other person goes into a work environment. So you're not together 24/7. You have something outside of yourselves. But for those that find themselves in midlife that are retired or semi-retired, like the case of my beloved and I, not that I'm semi-retired, but I mean, I work from home, not part-time, but quite almost part-time, a little bit above part-time. We'd be in each other's face a lot. And we've been having these conversations. How are we going to navigate this living together experience? How are we going to carve out our alone time? How can we find time to have our own space? Because we love our individual spaces right now. We love our solitude. And so having these conversations from a heart-centered level, we get together in the morning for coffee and we talk about how would this environment look? Would it require us maybe taking a day off or from 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. to be away from the home? I know a couple who got married in their late 60s. They moved in together, or they moved in together, got married, and they said, wow. And by the way, they're retired. They're 68. 68 when they got married. And they're like, we're at each other's throats sometimes because we're around each other 24/7. So they made a deal. On Tuesdays from 9 a.m. till 5 p.m., one of them goes outside the house and does activities outside of the house. And on Thursday, the other one does it. So they each have the home to themselves, but they also have 2 days where they're apart from one another. And that creates a bit of I was going to say missing, but it's not missing the other person. Is when you spend time apart, you learn to appreciate the other person. And isn't that what this is all about? But it starts by test driving it. This is my suggestion anyway, before you make this big commitment. You know what's fascinating to me? I'm a big fan of a show called Love is Blind on Netflix. Love is Blind. Now, the way the premise of the story works is you connect with a person in a blind environment before you have physical attraction. And when they determine some level of emotional connection in closed rooms, and then when they meet, they ignite. If the chemistry ignites it, it builds on the relationship. And one of the things they do is they spend a brief 5 days on a vacation with the other couples of the show, and then they spend 3 weeks together living together. Now, the show used to do 4 weeks, and I believe the original show was 8 weeks together, but they've condensed it now to 3 weeks. 3 weeks together to see if you really want to marry this person. These are younger people. It's a little different for our demographic. And for our demographic, we have a lot more challenges. We have a lot more moving parts. We might have children in our lives. But here's the thing. If you're considering moving in together, if this is part of the option of being together, then I think it's time to do it with intentionality. And when I say intentionality, I mean to really think this through. Do you know, when I got married in my late 20s, the church we went to had us do some couples counseling, pre marriage counseling. And it was kind of fascinating. The pastor talked about this and he talked about that and living together and money and all these things. And we're like, sure, no problem. We love each other. We'll figure it out. Sure, no problem. We love each other. We'll figure it out. Boy, was I naive in my mid 20s. I thought love solved everything. For those of us who've been around the block a few years, we know the importance of being mindful about our resources, being mindful about our individual time. We've spent, in some cases, as individuals, we spent significant time by ourselves. And we know how we operate. So to just naively dive into living together, which a lot of people do, without planning this out, I highly recommend doing this. Now, let me give you an example of a woman I coached some years ago. I was coaching a woman who was in a relationship that had 200 miles of distance. 200 miles of distance. She was predominantly driving to him every other weekend. She was doing the driving and spent weekends together every other weekend. By the way, I tried to suggest it should be a fair exchange, but he had obligations that didn't allow him, and she pretzeled himself to him. And then they decided to move in together, and she actually disrupted her family, her children, everything to move in together. And do you know what happened? 6 months into it, she was miserable. She was miserable. She didn't take my advice of living together in each other's homes for 1 month to see how they operate. But Jonathan, we don't have the kind of lifestyle we can do that. Well, folks, the most important decision you're ever going to make in your life is who you're going to spend the rest of your life with. The quality of our life is predicated by the quality of our relationships. I believe Esther Perel said that. And to naively think that love will solve all this? And ladies, you guys suck on the nipple of that perspective. If we love each other, we'll solve everything. I'm saying be grown up, be practical, live with each other in each other's homes, and there's no excuse for it if you're considering living with someone. But ultimately, what's the point of relationships if you're not going to go all in? Sure, you can have occasional companionship, you can have occasional connection, you can have occasional sex, until one person says, I'm done with this. How exciting is that? To have a casual relationship. How exciting is it to have a situationship or a hookup or friends with benefits? And when I say the word how exciting it is, how meaningful is it to find yourself in a casual relationship? Now, I recognize you may not know this person very well in the beginning. You're not going to do this on the first or second month or two of a relationship, although some people do that. But certainly by the time you get to the 6-month mark in a relationship, you might want to go, where's this relationship going? What is our long-term plan? One of the things my beloved and I did early on is we started to talk about who we were before we entered this relationship, including talking about our past relationships so we could get a sense of who we were before we met. Then we talked about who we are today, what our desires, our dreams, and goals are today, but also what our future would be like. We spend time talking about where's this relationship going, including the conversation of living together. Folks, you can play the game of just companionship, connection, and sex, but at some point, emotions and feelings are going to get attached, and you find yourself with someone who has no interest in any long-term plan. Folks, if you are operating from a short-term mating strategy, I'm here to say that's going to lead to emotional distress. This is why I'm a big proponent of having a long-term mating strategy. It's one of the reasons why in my private coaching, I teach you something called radical honesty, pre-qualifying this person that you're going to be in relationship, asking those deeper questions early on to determine if you're aligned with one another. And particularly if you can blend lives with one another. While it's radically important that you share the same values, or at least close to them, you share the same relationship vision, You have that emotional maturity and relationship skills that can sustain a long-term relationship. But more importantly, can your life blend in with this life? Sadly, many women meld into a man's life. They usually take on, they compromise and sacrifice themselves for a man. And I'm here to say, if you're in midlife, that could be a recipe for disaster. Finding a way, now it doesn't mean particularly the home, but blending a life together. Because as I said earlier, what's the point of relationship if you're not going to look at from a long-term perspective, from an all-in perspective? While marriage might not be on the table for many of you, and I get it, and that's okay. That's totally okay. By the way, who wants a relationship with the government anyway? I'm not a big fan of that. If my beloved and I get married, I'm just looking for a strict spiritual marriage. You can Google that, by the way, spiritual marriage. And we might have a domestic partnership relationship and be in each other's trust and wills. Those are the conversations we're having, even though we're only 5 months into this relationship. Because having a grown-up relationship is thinking about the future. And children have relationships where it's all about the now, it's all about the now, it's all about attraction, entertainment, romance, and physical connection without any foresight into the future. And that's simply my suggestion, is have some intentionality, particularly spending maybe a month in each other's homes just to see how well you get along. Is this sinking in? Is this resonating with you? I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. Post a comment below. I do my best to read them all in the first 24 hours. As always, if you find value in my videos, hey, hit that like button, share this video or my group Midlife Love Mastery to your friends. And if you want to connect with me directly, hey, schedule a discovery call with me to see if working with a coach is right for you. Also, this video was shot originally for my Midlife Love Mastery, where they get to ask questions. But if you're watching the replay, check out the links below. Check out my group called Midlife Love Mastery, where you have direct access to me on a regular basis. All right, I'm going to wrap up this video as I always do. First off, give myself a big, gigantic Jonathan Barrick of self-love. I'm going to reach into the camera and give you a hug of love if that's okay. I'm going to ask you to turn to someone, a pet, teddy bear, a pillow. Give either them a hug of love, because hugs are a great source of love. And let's face it, we could all use more love in our lives. Thanks a bunch. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.